Welcome to this Prepare for IELTS video, in which we're going to answer one of the most important questions of all. How do you find arguments? So many candidates go into the exam, look at the question, their brain freezes, they just can't think of any arguments to support the position they want to write about. So what do? Well, is it important? Yes, it absolutely is. If you look at the task, response, band descriptors and you focus on 8 and 9, you can see there that they really focus on providing arguments which support your ideas. So without good arguments, without good ideas, you're going to struggle to get a high grade. There are essentially 8 areas where you can look for arguments, and we'll show examples of how these work. So firstly, economic, and many questions have an economic element. So doing something might improve economic growth, it might improve employment, it might make people wealthier or poorer. We can also consider social elements. So doing something might improve the relationships between people and the relationships between groups. It might make the world more harmonious, or it might actually increase the chances of conflict. When we look at psychological, we mean connected with mental and emotional health. So lots of issues have an aspect of health, and this can be mental or emotional as well as physical, which we'll come to a little later. There can be a moral or ethical side to a question or an issue, and this is to do with whether something is fair or equal, or maybe to do with people's human rights. The environment is clearly important and relates to many questions, so this is to do with the health of the planet and avoiding the climate crisis. And if we look at political elements, they often refer to the stability and safety of the country or indeed of the world. Just as we've looked at psychological health, we can look at physical health, avoiding illness, increasing life expectancy, for example. And sometimes we can see an educational perspective, that a question is connected to learning and personal development. Let's have a look at a couple of questions now and see these ideas in action. So here's a typical question. It should be the goal of international organizations to make sure that every person on the planet has a functioning electronic device, such as a smartphone, and access to the internet. Do you agree? So this is asking for your opinion. And if you see this question, you might think, what arguments could I use? And you can consider our 8 areas. So firstly, you could see an economic aspect. You can say that if this happened, it would help globalization and international trade. There would be more goods and services bought and sold. Prices might go down. People's standard of living might actually rise. You might consider a social element. So if this happened, if everybody had access to a smartphone, social media would allow us to make friends from across the world. We would be happy. Society would be more cohesive. Obviously, you could also look at the alternative, that this would actually be bad for society. If you want to write that this is a bad idea, then you might start from the economic angle, saying that globalization is bad because it makes people poorer, and that from a social perspective, too much social media is actually quite dangerous. Moving on to the psychological element, and we can argue that we would become more broad-minded and open, thus healthier, because we would have access to a lot more information, a lot more social contact. And from a moral or ethical perspective, we can say that everybody would feel that they were treated more fairly, more equally. They would have equal opportunities. Remember that everybody is getting a smartphone, so this makes the world a more equal place. The same question, and now we can consider environmental elements, and we could say that news about the ecological crisis and how to fight it would spread. We would use less paper, so these are both reasons why this might be a good thing. It would help save the planet. From a political perspective, it would lead to greater political freedom around the world. This would eventually make governments and political systems more stable because more people would understand political issues. There might be freer and fairer governments. With regards to physical health, people could use apps to help them become fitter, and educationally, we would have access to a tremendous amount of information on a wide range of subjects. So you can see how all 8 of those perspectives could be used. Obviously, in an essay, you probably only need 2 or 3, but you could use all 8 in this situation. Let's look at a similar question. This time it's an advantages and disadvantages question. Schools should recognize the importance of technology in the modern world and provide all of their pupils with a smartphone or similar device. What would be the advantages and disadvantages of such a policy? So we can consider advantages. Economically, it would train pupils for the world of work, so it would be good for them and good for the wider economy. Socially, pupils will meet new friends online and develop social skills as they do that. Psychologically, pupils will feel stimulated, connected, purposeful and happy, and in terms of the moral or ethical position, everyone will be given the same opportunities. The environmental advantages are related to the idea that less paper will be needed, fewer trees will have to be chopped down. Politically, pupils will learn about the importance of their country and their civic duty. In terms of physical health, smartphones contain apps, as we said in the previous essay, which can be used to improve your personal health. And educationally, children will learn through interactive apps far more than with a boring teacher. But we could use arguments from these perspectives to create disadvantages as well. So economically, we could say that this will cost a great deal of money, which could be better spent in other areas, such as providing hospitals or healthcare professionals. Socially, face-to-face interaction will decrease, and this is a bad thing. Psychologically, pupils can see violent or pornographic material online, which will damage them emotionally. And from a moral or ethical perspective, this will widen the gap between rich countries and the poor countries which cannot afford to do it, because although in theory everybody would do it, we know that in practice that probably wouldn't happen. Other disadvantages, and from an environmental perspective, smartphones require non-renewable resources such as copper, so this actually would be bad for the planet. Politically, people will see fake news and stop trusting the government. In terms of their physical health, pupils will adopt a sedentary lifestyle, and in terms of education, pupils will stop listening to the teacher. So these are some of the arguments which you could use. Again, you will not need all 8 arguments in an essay. We've just done this to show you that there are a range of options. So what should you do now? Well, look at different essays and see if you can generate arguments and support for those arguments. As we say, you won't always be able to find 8, but you might at least be able to find the 2 or 3 that you need, so that when you go into the exam, you don't need to panic. We hope that helped. We look forward to seeing you soon, and thank you for watching.